Thank you. Hi, I'm Lindgren. Together with my colleague, Aina Tollefsen, we will be working with the Swedish part of the project. The presentation has three parts. First, I would like to give some basic information about the population geography of Sweden and briefly touch upon some migration trends in this country. In the second part, I would like to share some of the key topics of the recently launched government strategy to reduce segregation. And in the end, I would like to show a few preliminary ideas for studying the impact of social frontiers by using register data. In the project, we will also carry out interview studies looking into how life at the frontier is experienced by residents and community workers. Sorry. Yeah, today, Sweden has more than 10 million inhabitants. Since the 1950s, the population has increased by more than 3 million. And as you can see, the population distribution is spatially skewed. Urbanization has been the dominating population redistribution trend during the last 200 years, as the economy has transformed from an agrarian to an industrialized and now recently to a knowledge-intensive economy. The map to the left shows the number of people within 30 kilometers. Most people live in the three metropolitan regions, Stockholm, Gothenburg, and Malmö. And apart from the metropolitan regions, there are a number of regional centers with increasing population numbers. The cartogram to the right tells the same story, but in a more colorful way. Many small municipalities have lost large parts of their populations, and you see them here in blue color, whereas the three metropolitan regions have grown quite considerably, especially their suburban municipalities. And similar patterns can actually be seen in the regional centers. So we have had population dispersal on the regional level. Sweden used to be a land of emigration. Till the 1930s, there was net out-migration. More than 1 million people moved to America between 1850 and 1920. From the 1930s and onwards, Sweden has been the land of immigration. After World War II, the booming Swedish industry was in high demand for labor. Labor migration was an important part to meet these demands. Some labor migrants came from the other Nordic countries, but also from other European countries. Since 1980, the immigration flows have mostly been dominated by refugees and family reunion. The figure to the left shows emigration and immigration during the last 2 decades. The immigration curve has been more or less flat, whereas immigration numbers have increased. The figure to the right shows the development of residence permits from the 1980s and onwards. In the early 80s, the number of permits was close to 10,000 a year. Today, it has gone up to well over 130,000. In the data, the migration flows from the Balkan War in the beginning of the 1990s can be seen. Also, the more recent war in Syria. In 2016, more than 160,000 people immigrated. The figure to the left shows the increase of foreign-born people in the population. And since the turn of the century, the share of foreign-born has increased from 11% to nearly 20%. And the top 3 countries are Syria, Iraq, and Finland. Geopolitical turbulence and labor migration in the past are linked to several countries on the list. Integration is a difficult concept. People have different views on definitions and what it takes to achieve integration. I would say that labor market integration is one of the important factors. And when looking at labor market statistics, there are some disturbing facts. There are large differences between foreign-born and natives when it comes to labor market position and jobs. Employment rates are lower, unemployment rates are higher, and we know that unemployment strikes harder in many immigrant groups during economic downturns. It takes a long time for newly arrived people to enter the labor market. It may take 8 years to get the first job. Upper secondary education is found to be very important for getting a job, both for natives and immigrants. The ongoing transformation of the economy, where knowledge-intensive sectors are growing, brings about a situation where the need for highly qualified labor is increasing. This also means that jobs requiring no or little qualifications are slowly decreasing, making it difficult for people with short formal education to get a job at all. Measures for increasing people's educational level, improving language skills, and reducing discrimination are important steps for more labor market integration. Trying to reduce segregation related to housing issues is another key factor for integration. The Swedish government has recently launched a strategy to reduce segregation. Some key elements of the new strategy are related to the importance of having a long-term perspective when working against segregation. Another factor is the need for more cross-sector cooperation between different parts of government and other organizations. Efforts need to be carried out on different levels of society, and it's recognized that the knowledge-based way of working is the best way to go. The strategy includes 5 sub-goals and a number of action points to address. Housing is, of course, identified as an important factor. It's stressed that the lack of mixed tenure is part of the problem. The built environment is more or less static in the short run, so changes have to be made step by step. Strengthening social sustainability perspectives in spatial planning could be one way to introduce more mixed tenure when new residential areas are planned. Today, school segregation is on the agenda. Nowadays, parents can choose which school to send their children. This has resulted in a quite clear sorting along the lines of socioeconomic position and ethnicity. Increased school segregation is not helpful regarding schools' role to compensate for differences in socioeconomic background and to give all students equal chances to get good school results. Regarding labor market, speeding up the time it takes to getting newly arrived people to work is regarded as an important measure. Long-term unemployment increases the risk of dropping out from the labor market permanently. Improved possibilities for adults to study is regarded as an important action point. Measures to increase participation in democratic processes and to reduce crime are also pointed out as important parts of the strategy. I would like to round off this presentation by saying a few words about some of our ideas for research. We have some key resources for doing research on social frontiers. First of all, we can depart from previous research helping us to understand what the frontier is, how to find them in the urban landscape, and what impacts to be expected. I didn't mention it before, but the government's segregation strategy also explicitly talks about the negative effects of barriers in cities. Frontiers might hinder human interaction and exchange. Since the government is addressing these issues, research focusing on barriers in the urban landscape seems highly policy relevant. A third resource we have at hand is individual level register data. This type of data makes it possible to observe individual characteristics and how these vary over time. The time span covers at least 4 decades, which makes it possible to observe the individual going through many life stages. Another good thing with data is that the place of residence is geocoded onto a fine-grained raster covering the entire country. This is why we will be able to zoom in on places, almost blocks, neighboring social frontiers. All in all, these resources will make it possible to identify social frontiers in the urban landscape and to identify the small-scale geographies in close proximity to social frontiers. It will also enable us to sample individuals who used to live close to social frontiers and analyze the links between this experience and future life outcomes. This slide shows some examples of research questions we could address by means of some of the resources mentioned. We will depart from statistical areas that are reasonably comparable between the 3 countries. These represent more or less neighborhoods, and in the Swedish case, these are called demographic statistical units. One thing to look at is the social frontier proximity effect. Does it matter if you live close to the social frontier or farther away in the same neighborhood? Another aspect could be called social frontier altitude effects. Does it matter if the differences between the groups on each side of the frontier are large or small? And as a final example, we can look into possible social frontier asymmetry effects. This is simply to study whether the potential burdens of the frontier are equally distributed between the two sides of the frontier. One could think about it in terms of rich and poor. Regarding future life outcomes, is it more harmful for people living on the poor side as compared to people living on the rich side? In this project, we will also do qualitative research looking into how life at the frontier is experienced by residents and community workers. Key frontiers detected by quantitative analysis will be selected for in-depth analysis. In total, we plan to do 40 in-depth interviews. And the aim is to learn more about how life at the frontier is experienced by residents and community workers. Thanks for listening.